Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, big storm coming in across the Bering Sea, and with it, pretty heavy weather here. That's will be heaviest here in the red shaded areas. That's the zones for winter storm warnings that are out. And you can see much of the western interior here, Yukon Delta, up across the Seward Peninsula, snow, blowing snow, the usual blizzard sort of type of conditions or that would reduce visibilities down to a quarter mile or less in some areas, while it's more for the heavier snowfall in other areas. And it's going to be kind of touch and go here along the coast, especially where the rain-snow line exactly locates itself. Will make a big difference along that area. Inland areas and farther north see the better chance of the heavier snow and the lower visibilities in blowing snow. Snow advisories, Bristol Bay. High wind warnings here for the Alaska Peninsula and out to the eastern Aleutians. Same, looking at winds gusting 70 miles per hour or greater. Higher gusts through the channeled areas there once that system drops through later tonight and tomorrow. And then snow advisory coming in late tonight or tomorrow here for the Kenai Peninsula, mostly down around the Homer area, looking for anywhere 4 to 7 inches of snow possibly falling as that system slips on by to the south. Moving on, well, the next one you can see we've got advisories, winter weather advisories here for the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, with the warning here again for the Seward Peninsula into about the Galena area down to McGrath for the heavier snowfall. Now moving on to the satellite imagery, clear and cold here over the eastern interior into northwest Canada. Cirrus beginning to push its way eastward into the western interior zones with kind of a warm front right through here and ridging and the whole pattern shifting eastward. Actually, the system's coming over the top of high pressure that will actually redevelop farther to the west, but the main low center still back to the west here. And of course, the frontal boundary well west of even St. Lawrence Island. So southeast winds, rain mix and snow along the southwest coast here up to St. Lawrence Island, and then becomes snow as you just get inland a little ways with rain and breezy conditions back down into the central Aleutians. And then behind the front looks pretty good out towards Shemya. Southeast coast today still under the influence of yesterday's system. Not nearly as heavy in the snowfall, a much lighter and mostly cloudy, occasional light snow going on today over the northern or central and northern areas, and then warmer air rainfall to the south, but that's all in a decreasing mode here as everything begins to finally slip off either to the southeast or on off to the east. And on the surface map for today, see Arctic high pressure over the Northwest Territories, and that dominating the eastern interior here with the colder temperatures. And then we still had the mixture of precipitation here across the southeast coast, not nearly as heavy as yesterday, but hanging on, especially down to the south there with this low center near the Queen Charlotte Islands, and then more of a snow condition up to the north as you stay in the cold air. And then back to the west here, here comes the low center, still back over the Russian Far East, the front pushing out though almost to Nunivak Island, coming across the Pribilof, rain and gusty winds with that, on down to the Aleutians, lighter rainfall amounts with a warm front here along the Alaska Peninsula, and then rain becoming snow here as you move east and north into the interior. So be a highly changeable pattern here as far as precipitation goes. This low forecast to slide south, or initially moves to the east there, and you can see a big increase in the winds across St. Lawrence Island out of the northwest here across the eastern Bering Sea on down to the Alaska Peninsula. And the high wind warning should be in full array at that time. Later tonight, rain spreads into Kodiak Island, Warmer air coming northward, again, kind of touch and go on the rain and snow line where exactly will set up, but there will be warmer air aloft coming in over the top of the colder air, so it could be some mixed precipitation possible, freezing rain maybe, but nothing that significant, and then stays clear and cold over the Copper River Basin, northward across all the north slope there, well below zero tonight, maybe 25, 26, 27 below zero up over the Yukon Flats, and clearing out and colder for the panhandle there, but still holding on to a chance of moisture through much of the night tonight, that low center moving very slowly off to the east. And then for tomorrow, it's still a trough, actually a trough in the upper air, keeps it kind of unsettled down to the south, but definitely breezier and colder and actually clearer here over the central and northern areas. This system now sliding right on down into the, across Kodiak Island, 974 millibar low. Really strong winds here continue through much of tomorrow for the Alaska Peninsula, back up all along the southwest coast, and then they begin to diminish and turn more northerly there, St. Lawrence Island, and northeast up around the northwest coast there. Snow showers here, but back to the west, dry, and then quite an area of snow here with the heaviest amounts to the south, but some snow, at least to start with here, will be up into the central interior. Mixed rain and snow along the coast there, and the southeast coast, as I mentioned, pretty good. And then this even this begins to slip to the southeast in Monday's outlook there. The low center continues to the southeast, so really improving here over the interior. Coldest up over the northeast interior. Actually not all that cold, even though the skies will clear out here over the southwest part of the state. And then looks pretty good for rain or snow chances, especially southern areas. Northern Panhandle staying dry with cold outflow winds coming down Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay, and on the north side of the upslope areas there, that's going to result in areas of light snow over the eastern Copper River Basin, and mostly in Canada. Back out to the west, next system here pushing eastward, not quite as strong as the one that's coming through right now, but that'll bring increase in the wind and rain back to the central Aleutians. Again, southerly flow, warm temperatures with this, so we got some good warm air surging northward again. So it looks like a brief chance of snow to start with St. Lawrence Island, but that'll rapidly change over to rain as that system pulls eastward. And otherwise, main inland areas here of Alaska, with the high centered now about 1,035 millibars, coldest temperatures well below zero at night, and below zero even for the highs up over the northeast interior. Colder temperatures here into the Susitna Valley, still hanging on to some clouds around the Kenai Peninsula, but this whole precipitation zone shifting off slowly to the southeast, but Kodiak Island still in it with rain and snow, gusty northeast winds. And for the lows for tonight, again, maybe down to 20, 22 below here, coldest in the Yukon Flats, definitely falling below zero down to the Copper River Basin areas, and then below zero on the eastern coast, above on the west side, teens and 20s, Seward Peninsula, 20s out along the coastline, falling once the front goes through. Pribilof, so hanging in the lower 40s, and it looks like lower 20s northern panhandle to lower to mid 30s over the south. Highs for tomorrow, again staying well below zero here over the eastern interior to lower 30s to near 40 out over the southwest coast. Mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians, and 30s for the most part over the panhandle. And then looking at Monday morning's lows, again down 15 to 25 below northeast interior, 15 below all the way to the Copper River Basin. Lower 30s southwest coast, mid 30s here for the Alaska Peninsula and on out to the Aleutians, so staying above freezing there. Colder now for the panhandle, teens 10 to 15 here for the northern areas, and lower 30s on down to the south. Highs in the afternoon, maybe reaching the lower 40s, lower 20s north side, and still quite cold over the interior.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, broad area of IFR here associated with the front coming in and moisture moving well into the southwest interior. In fact, moving out of the southwest interior here and spreading over Kodiak Island into south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, back across Kuskokwim Valley, on off to the northwest there, and marginal VFR falling behind. Eventually VFR out to the west, VFR here over the eastern interior with conditions, as we'll see, will be coming down. Tomorrow afternoon, that'll be spreading eastward on the IFR, possibly getting into the western Copper River Basin areas, on up to the southern side of the Central Alaska Range, and then back to near the Alaska Range a little to the east, improving back here to the west with marginal VFR. Whole system staying far enough south that it'll remain VFR up here to the north, except for the western Arctic coast, marginal VFR down to the Bering Strait, and the northern Bering, northeast Bering here, but looking pretty good farther out to the west, a break, and then another batch of IFR sliding in with the next system out there. Very nice over the panhandle, pretty good VFR throughout the entire day. And then for the Monday morning forecast, that whole system sliding southward, so that's going to take all the lower conditions with it. So I have this narrow band of IFR that drives right into the east side of Kodiak Island, and then VFR back to the west there. Marginal VFR now just hanging on the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Otherwise, we got a lot of VFR over the interior now. Not too bad over the eastern Bering. Patch of IFR up there along the northwest coast. And in this area, IFR continuing to advance slowly eastward, spreading in toward Adak. And that'll continue throughout the afternoon, make a pretty good jog actually, all the way east to Nikolsky. On Alaska, probably stay VFR the entire day. Conditions coming down for the Pribilofs in the afternoon. Same pattern there for St. Lawrence Island. VFR here, as you can see, over much of interior Alaska, just some patchy marginal stuff there along the Alaska Peninsula and near or off the Arctic coast into the Chukchi Sea. IFR remaining off the coast here of the Panhandle, but definitely conditions deteriorating through the afternoon. Marginal VFR central and southern areas. Passes shaping up like this for tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan, too far north to see any effect of this system, so both passes there will be VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, IFR mostly the entire day probably. Same forecast for rainy and windy. IFR here on the in the pass and south, but it'll be a sharp contrast north VFR into the Tanana Valley, and this could improve to marginal VFR late in the afternoon possibly. And then for Isabel, marginal VFR gradually becoming IFR, and for Mentasta not quite as bad, VFR and then possibly becoming marginal VFR late in the day. And Tanita, IFR, and Portage, same forecast IFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Looking at the freezing levels here, cold air now plunging down across the Bering Sea, 2,000 feet now, back down along the Aleutians, but nosing back northward here to Kodiak Island, otherwise at the surface or below across much of the interior of Alaska, as well as the southeast coast. And then icing threats, moisture coming in from the southeast, so could be some areas of considerable moderate rime icing above about 3,000 feet here, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula to Fognak Island, and then breaking out just to the southwest there, and then another batch of icing here of the lighter variety along the southwest coast to the Alaska Peninsula. This mostly will be out of the picture tomorrow over the southern panhandle, and then more icing coming in from the west. Jet stream. Ridging northward here out of the western Bering now as this system is in motion. So this will be about midday position, give or take, but it'll be rapidly dropping southeastward by the afternoon and evening. It'll be down in this position. And then we've got a northwest jet up here developing 70 to 120 knots with a trough right over the panhandle. 9,000 foot winds, pretty strong. We've got 30 knot northeasterlies coming off the Chukchi Sea, 50 knots St. Lawrence Island. Big increase in the winds, very strong, 65 to 75 knots here, right across the Alaska Peninsula, and then falling back to about 35 to 40 around Unalaska Island. 20 knots for Kodiak. Southerlies on the increase on the west side of that ridge, and not too bad over the interior, 10 to 20, with maybe 30 knots along the Brooks Range. 3,000 foot winds here, 55 knots wrapping around this low center, 50 to 55, about 40 for the Kenai Peninsula. But by far the strongest winds out of the northwest back here over the eastern Bering Sea and Alaska Peninsula. That's where you'll possibly see some severe turbulence there as well.
Visually, by looking at a map, or better yet, a satellite image, the impending dilemma is readily apparent. The Hubbard Glacier, Alaska's largest tidewater glacier, is advancing. It has, and it is likely that it will close off and permanently seal Russell Fjord. The lake level will rise from natural drainage. Once the lake level reaches 130 feet, it is likely to overflow at its southern end into the Old Seatuck and then the mainstream of the Seatuck River. The effects would be devastating and should be prevented if at all possible. From its surface, the Seatuck River, located in southeast Alaska near the small village of Yakutat, looks like many other gorgeous crystal clear water Alaskan streams. But on closer analysis, a glimpse beneath the surface illustrates the fabric from which true legends are woven. The Seatuck is one of the most, if not the most, productive and prolific river systems given its size and water volume in all of Alaska. The great diversity of salmonids in the river is an anomaly of the finest kind. Few rivers host all 5 species of Pacific salmon. Dog salmon, pink salmon, silver salmon, sockeye salmon, and king salmon all prosper in the Seatuck. In addition, 2 distinct runs of wild steelhead, resident rainbow trout, and both migrant and resident Dolly Varden char thrive and flourish in the bounties of this legend. While the main stem of the Seatuck is only slightly more than 20 miles long, a small river or stream by any criteria, its entire length provides exceptional spawning or rearing habitat for one species or another. In addition to the miles and miles of exceptional spawning areas, overhanging and submerged riparian vegetation as well as large woody debris provide abundant cover, shade, and food sources for the emergent fry, fingerlings, and salmon and trout smolt. The Seatuck River's exceptionally high salmonid productions are thought to be primarily driven by the river's stable hydrologic regime, high base flow, low gradient, and high levels of dissolved nutrients. In underwater scenes such as we see here, mature steelhead, along with 4 species of salmon fry, in addition to dollies and rainbows, are proof of the river's incredibly productive qualities. It is little wonder that this magnificent river ecosystem has produced annual historical commercial salmon harvests ranging in excess of 1.5 million pounds of fish. That, of course, is in addition to the hundreds of thousands of in-river salmon required for escapement annually and the annual sport and subsistence harvests. To steelhead fishermen from around the world, the Seatuck River is legend. All steelhead in the river are wild stock and weigh in at greater than a 10-pound average. Many specimens over 40 inches and 20 pounds are taken each year. The fishery is basically catch and release, another non-consumptive use of the river system. The Seatuck River gives up its steelhead treasures reluctantly. To be able with a fly rod to pursue, land, and delicately release a powerful wild silvery dynamo in a clear water stream of this size is an extraordinarily exhilarating and pleasurable commune with nature, one which can seldom, if ever, be encountered anywhere else in the world, under the watchful eye of bald eagles and brown bears. The Seatuck River also encompasses the cultural legends of local Tlingit Indians, the native inhabitants of the area, many of whom for centuries lived on the river. It is an all-encompassing legend which includes the old-growth forests that surround the river, the brown bears, bald eagles, mergansers, and other small and big game animals that find the Seatuck River a vital link in their food chains in this dynamic ecosystem. The Tlingit Indian subsistence culture is steeped in traditional harvests from this legend, the Seatuck River. Additionally, the United States Congress considered the Seatuck legendary when it included the river for study for possible inclusion in the wild and scenic river systems. While the state and federal governments wanted the Seatuck included, local folks preferred a joint city-state-federal management scheme which wouldn't bring instant fame and hordes of visitors to this incredible and truly wild and scenic river. The forces of nature in Alaska can and have over the years dealt catastrophic blows to communities, infrastructures, and the environment in the form of earthquakes, forest fires, floods, and typhoon-force winds, as well as bone-chilling cold snaps. Now comes a new recipe for catastrophic riverine disaster, an advancing glacier. Borrowing parts of a recent narrative in Alaska Magazine, April 2003, concisely describes the dilemma. Quote, "At a time when most glaciers in Alaska are retreating, the massive Hubbard Glacier is advancing and threatening the river. Last July, the glacier surged forward, pushing a gravel moraine up against Gilbert Point and sealing off the mouth of Russell Fjord. The resulting Russell Lake quickly filled with runoff and snowmelt. The water rose more than 60 feet above sea level before breaking through the moraine on August 14th and releasing trapped harbor seals, sea otters, and porpoises. A similar event occurred in May of 1986. Scientists and officials who monitor the glacier's movements say that sooner or later, the glacier will permanently seal off Russell Fjord. When that occurs, the rising lake will likely overflow into the Seatuck River watershed, flooding the river and potentially wiping out the salmon and steelhead fisheries. Some have suggested that we just, quote, let nature take its course, unquote. However, those who have seen the exceptional beauty of the river, those who have observed the unique productivity of the Seatuck watershed and its ecosystems, know that destruction, either by man or by Mother Nature, of the Seatuck River as we now know it, is simply not an acceptable option. That is why those who have visited and seen and interacted with and come to know the Seatuck River, whether from around the world or around the state, share the passion for a vision by local Yakutat residents which involves preserving the Seatuck River in its present state.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the sea ice advisory here for this Saturday. Still advancing here, noticeably here along the central coast areas. Actually, also noticeably from yesterday here along the western coast. Not a lot of change down here along the Yukon Delta coast, Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, those areas. And it's going to be kind of a variable. Not really expecting a lot of additional ice growth with the fluctuating wind and temperatures that are going to be coming in the next several days. Northerlies coming in with the cold air, and then that'll be followed by southerlies, and so kind of a progressive weather pattern isn't inducive to a lot of an increase in sea ice, especially here from the Bering Strait southward. Anyway, moving on to the marine forecast, light winds down across the southern southeast coast, 10 knots. East 20, pick up to east-southeast 30 knots, so small craft advisories on the north coast, but only 5 to 6 foot seas. Still pretty good winds. Stevens Passage gusts 40 knots out of the north, and then sustained 40 knots for northern Link Canal. And for the following day, still gales, minimum gales, but looking at storm force wind gusts out of the north and increasing there for Stevens Passage with gusts up to 45 knots, and small craft advisories here all along the coast out of the east, 35 knots here on the north central coast, and then southeast 25 to the south. Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet northeast here, north of the Forelands, picks up the small craft advisories, pretty good wind north 30 knots tomorrow, and then 45 knots for Kachemak Bay, 15-foot seas, northeast 45 there for the Barents, turn east at 45 for the western North Gulf Coast, and fall back to minimum gales off to the east there, northeast 25. Prince William Sound. Those come down to about 20 knots, gradual decrease in the winds there for the Sound, but full gales continue along the North Gulf Coast, 45, and then all the way up to 50 knots out of the northeast for the Barents, 22-foot seas, Kachemak Bay north at 40 knots for Monday, and continued 30-knot winds, mostly south of the Forelands. For the Alaska Peninsula, again tomorrow, storm warnings right across the peninsula out of the northwest with 65-knot gusts coming out of the channeled areas here along the peninsula. 45-knot northwesterlies from Bristol Bay swing on down southwest to Kodiak Island, but also 45-knot winds in the forecast for the east side of Kodiak Island, 40 knots for Shelikof Strait. And then northeast 55 knots here with that storm drop southward, pretty good gradient. So storm force winds there on the east side of Kodiak, gales, Shelikof Strait. Sitkinak to maybe Chignik north at 50 knots, falling back to 35 to 40 for the peninsula. And for the eastern Aleutians, storm warnings, 45 to 50 knot winds from the northwest, mostly strongest across Unalaska Island. gradually diminishing back to about 25 to 30, swinging around to the south, and then southeast coming back up to 40 for the far western zones. And then those drop off, front pushes through west-southwest 25 to 30 out west there, and small craft advisories, 25 knot winds, central Aleutians, and 30 to 40 knot winds now to the northwest across Unalaska Island. Southwest coast, storms quite prevalent here just about everywhere. 55 knots along the southwest coast, 50 knots to the Pribilofs, gusts 70, 55 knots St. Matthew Island, 50 knots even St. Lawrence Island, all out of the northwest, 20-plus foot seas. And then those swing around to the south for St. Lawrence Island on Monday with lighter winds, definitely here, kind of a call in the wind field there, 15 knots, but then back into the gales south of Nunivak Island. South gales coming into the northern Bering Sea, southeast 20 for the Pribilofs. And up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast 15 to 20, pick up 25 there for the central coast. A little bit of an increase, 30 knots, east swinging around to the northeast, and then those go gale from Cape Beaufort down into the Wales area. Then for Monday, lighter winds now, east-southeast at about 20, all the way up to the central coast, and then they drop down to 15 knots, back into that light wind pattern there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. For tonight, here comes the storm with the winter storm warnings with it for snow, blowing snow with advisories, winter weather advisories into Bristol Bay, and then winter weather advisories up to the northwest as well. Clear and cold eastern interior continues to slowly improve and clear out over the southeast coast. But it'll kind of get stuck there over the southern panhandle of the upper trough, kind of hanging in the area there. Clear and cold to the north. Strong winds here from St. Lawrence Island right down along the Alaska Peninsula. And then on Monday, everything tends to wind down with a weaker front coming in from the west.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
America's top critics are unanimous in their praise for the Vietnam War.